He's Australia's most wanted man and the most elusive. Malcolm Naden has been on the run for 7 years, crisscrossing some of our harshest terrain. It seems every time the police get close, Naden slips back into the scrub and the shadows. He's becoming a legend of sorts, like those bushrangers of old. And just like them, there's a bounty on his head. But Malcolm Naden is no hero. He's a desperate man, armed and dangerous, and he needs to be caught. But join this manhunt for a few days and you soon realise just what the police are up against. Only a 4-hour drive from Sydney, but as remote as you can get. There are places here no man has stood. 80,000 hectares of ancient geological violence, the Barrington Tops National Park is so tortured, twisted and bewildering it defies navigation. It is also where Australia's most wanted fugitive, Malcolm Naden, plays a dangerous game of cat and mouse with police.
I need to remind you about the dangers out there in regards to Malcolm Naden. He has shot already to avoid apprehension, and he is an extreme risk to us.
This is Strikeforce Durkin, one of the biggest police manhunts in Australian history. And as with our most famous cop chases, this one has been infused with the mystique of the bushranger, part threat, part legend. We've talked to a few local people. I'm not sure they have the feeling that he's that dangerous anymore.
This person is a murderer. He has shot to avoid apprehension, and we consider him extremely dangerous.
Malcolm Naden is alleged to have committed a litany of crimes. Arrest warrants have been issued for the sexual assault of a Dubbo schoolgirl and the murder of 24-year-old Christy Scholes. Naden's also wanted for questioning over the disappearance of his cousin, 24-year-old Letitia Nolan.
I've got a feeling that she might be around here somewhere. This is where a car was found, just up the side of the river here.
It's 7 years since Letitia Nolan was last seen. Her car was found here by the Macquarie River in central New South Wales. And mysteriously, years later, her wallet washed up on the bank. For her dad, Mick Pete, this place is the only physical link he's got to his daughter.
How do you think he's bearing up?
He doesn't deal with it good. I see it every day, and it breaks my heart. So it hurts because I don't want to see him go through what he has to go through.
Mick's life is blighted by having to imagine his daughter's final moments, an endless churn of questions.
I'm thinking he may have committed a sex crime on my daughter. She's resisted, and I think he's murdered her and put her in the river.
And that is the last thing you want to think would have happened to your daughter.
That's the last thing I want to think, that's for sure. She was my first child. She was 24 years old, and she had 4 kids.
Nobody has more interest than you in the apprehension of Malcolm Naden. He needs to be caught, doesn't he?
Yep, he needs to be caught.
If only to give you the answers you need.
Exactly.
How have you handled this?
It's been pretty hard.
I watched the young Naden grow up.
Here? So this is the house?
That's the house, yeah.
Alan Nolan is Malcolm Naden's uncle. He knew him long before Naden became Australia's most wanted and watched his nephew slide into a dark and isolated world, retreating to his bedroom, shunning even his family.
There's a girl dead and another missing. When do you start to add things up and find Malcolm in the frame?
When Christy was found in the room, deceased, And it's in Malcolm's room, of course.
That's the bedroom that he kept locked.
The one that he keeps locked and the one that you don't see him leave. He was isolated in there and, well, nobody else was allowed in there. And for some ungodly reason, he took a life in there, you know.
That was back in 2005, and Naden's been on the run ever since. Despite thousands of police hours, hundreds of officers in the field, and a $250,000 bounty on Naden's head, he's still out there.
It is very frustrating because it's so difficult, it's so remote, it's so hard to get the police out into these areas.
Assistant Commissioner Carleen York is in charge of Strike Force Durkin.
Is it embarrassing to you that after so much time you haven't caught him?
No, it's not embarrassing. It's a very difficult task, and that rugged bushland, he can get away and then secrete himself again. So it's a very, very difficult operation and quite different to what you would do in a suburban community.
Here in some of the roughest country in Australia, the fugitive Malcolm Naden is widely regarded as some kind of will-o'-the-wisp, able to vanish into the landscape. From time to time, he's seen here, he's seen there, he's sought everywhere, but the sightings are rarely confirmed. He has become as insubstantial as the very mist that so often shrouds this mountain wilderness. One tiny human needle in such a vast and daunting haystack. Adam, from your training, what are the key aspects of survival here?
Well, you have water is one of them. Obviously, shelter and food are your three basic elements to survival.
Survival and evasion behind enemy lines are matter-of-fact basics for former Army reconnaissance and surveillance paratrooper Adam Mulcahy.
He's not going to be up high. He will be down low where the river system is, because this is where you have food, water, and you can make your shelter quite easily.
And when there's only one person?
One person, obviously, it's easier to hide with one person.
And Adam shows us how. Oh, mate, it's all up and down here, isn't it? There's not much flat land.
No, not the Barrington Tops. It's pretty steep in this country.
But there is a little hideaway. From outside, I wouldn't even have noticed there's a fire in here.
No, you can't see the fire. It's at the base of the tree. The fire's quite small. You could hear them coming, smell them coming, bring down the canopy on top of him, put out his fire. That all can happen in a matter of seconds. Someone will walk past, none the wiser.
And what are you smoking in there? Some kind of meat?
Yeah, roadkill.
You'd eat that?
You are in a survival situation, so roadkill would definitely be an option of choice for food. Preserves the meat over a longer period of time. You can sustain for 6 months having dried meat. It ends up like being beef jerky, basically.
Adam, I know you're trained for this kind of thing, but living here for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it would definitely take a toll on someone doing this all the time.
Anyone who's in a situation of long-term social isolation, what happens to them is they become increasingly aroused and tense, they become increasingly suspicious, and they often become increasingly aggressive. His satisfactions come from day-to-day survival, and every day he stays free, I suspect, is a day for him which is worthwhile and gratifying.
Police psychological profiling puts Naden in the most severe and unstable category. Forensic psychiatrist Professor Paul Mullen has spent a lifetime with some of Australia's darkest criminal minds, including the man behind the Port Arthur massacre, Martin Bryant. Looking at his behaviour before he went on the run, he was already practising for a life of isolation.
This was a man who was finding other people increasingly frightening, increasingly problematic. He was hiding away. He was sure that he was in danger. So he will feel safer out there, away from people, than he did before all these events occurred and he fled.
I know he shuns humanity, but Is he lonely out there?
Not by this time, no. I mean, his world has changed. He probably feels relieved not to have to deal with other people who he fears and suspects. And now his world is the world of the bush.
So he has in fact become a creature of his environment, some of the most rugged country in Australia.
Absolutely. Very sensitive to his environment, probably knows it backwards by now.
But Naden's not only a creature of the wild. He sometimes seeks shelter in the abandoned homesteads that dot this unforgiving landscape. And everyone around here has their own Malcolm Naden story. Lynn and Dave Daly run cattle here, perhaps closer than they might know to where the fugitive roams free.
You know, there was just a bloke stopped me on the side of the road saying he was bogged.
And he wanted Dave to go off the road down a couple of kilometres. To pull him out, he said his car was stuck. And as Dave said later, I wouldn't have a clue whether that was Malcolm Naden or not.
We didn't know what he looked like until just recently. And so there are a whole lot of people that sort of wander around up here, a lot of pig shooters, a lot of, other itinerants around.
But perhaps Naden's closest encounters have been with the very people he's trying to evade. Naden has been within metres of the police, not once, not twice, but 3 times. In one case, after finding him holed up in a holiday hut, officers let him slip out the back door. And shortly after, Naden shot and seriously injured a pursuing officer, once again slipping the police net.
Police were going in through the bush when they came very close to what was later confirmed to be his campsite. They didn't see him at all, and the first thing that they knew that he was there was when our officer was shot.
Now that really ramped up the game, didn't it? I mean, shooting a copper when you're on the run is not a great thing to do.
No, it's not a sensible thing. It did ramp it up.
Do you want him dead or alive?
We want to take him in alive. We want to negotiate with him and try and reason with him to give himself up peacefully, and we'll take him into custody.
Meanwhile, almost a world away on the Macquarie River, a father waits to find out how his daughter died and why and where the body lies. They start to see him as some kind of romantic bushranger figure, don't they? Not a deranged murderer.
My daughter didn't lose her life to no Ned Kelly, or she lost her life to a murderer. And
a very sad man, really.
A very sad man. He needs to be brought in and just pay for his crimes.
Hello, I'm Charles Wooley. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.